Abani everyone. This is Professor Alman Rahh, Professor Emeritus, California State University, Long Beach, Africana Studies Department, former city councilman for the city of Compton, former Compton Unified School District Board of Trustees, and former Compton Unified School District Board of Trustees. We want to welcome you here to the Conscious Corner for this lively discussion, in-depth discussion, as looking for solutions. A lot of the issues that we look for, a lot of people discuss problems, but these brothers, Brother Brian Muhammad and Brother Reginald Muhammad, are well, we call them experts in coming up with solutions. From the reparations movement by Reginald Muhammad. What's the name of that? Your program, your book?
We're here at the National Reparations Institute in Atlanta, Georgia, brother. The only policy center and think tank in the country centered on complete reparations.
Yeah, but you had a book out.
Yes, sir. It's called the National Reparations Declaration.
Declaration.
Black redress.
Hey, Reginald, and then Brother Brian is one of the staff writers for the Muhammad for the Final Call. It used to be Muhammad Speaks. Yes, I know Sister Charlene Muhammad very well. She's interviewed me a number of times. I've been on the front page of the Final Call a couple of times with Minister Farrakhan. We were very close, and on first, he knows me very well. We spoke together, we ate together, and the minister is always in my prayers. And Brother Reginald Muhammad did a recognition of his 92nd birthday of Brother Reginald Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
You wouldn't know it. This brother, Minister Farrakhan, still push it. See, you just pull him up on YouTube. He got Brother Ishmael doing most of the teaching at the mosque, but at the same time, every now and then, he out there in the front line. So we're going to get started with this lively discussion of solutions. We're going to talk about maybe possible 3 issues. First of all, the resurgence of the Pan-African movement, as Brother Brian Muhammad talked about in his article in the Final Call, and the update on the reparations movement by Reginald Muhammad, and repatriation. Should Black people start preparing to get passport, at least visit, and see if it's beneficial to move to the continent of Africa. But as you said, as Jabal said, you got to go there to live there and learn the cultures. You can't just go there and try to make them Americans. But anyway, we're going to get started. I want to welcome Brother Rashaki Maskani, who is responsible for this Zoomcast, and he's on every Wednesday with regards to what we call the Community Education Network. We want to welcome Brother Mshinda, who's a longtime supporter and member of our Zoomcast. He's out in Louisiana. And Brother Ernest McBride, who is a longtime activist, but the legacy of his family, the McBride family, extends all the way back to his father, who was one of the first to really put forth activism in unions in the city of Long Beach, being one of the first presidents of the NAACP and the Optima Club, and one of the most political scientists without a degree. His brother, just based on his wit, his wisdom, and his experience coming out of the South. And he really galvanized the city of Long Beach to resist the oppression that some didn't even know they was going through. They thought it was normal to be discriminated against. But Mr. McBride said, no, you ain't supposed to be treated like this. So anyway, we're going to start off with Brother Reggie. How you want to start with Brother Brian or you?
Let's start with Brother Bryant.
Oh,
Am I still on?
yeah, he's just showing
Yeah.
you
Oh,
Pan-Africanship
oh,
appealing to
I'll
you.
start with Brother Bryant and Professor Rahh. I want to first off thank you, brother. In the name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful, I bear witness, regardless of land, language, or location, there is but one God, and I bear witness to all of the prophets. I greet each and every one of you all on the Zoom Conscious Corner tonight with the greeting words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. And for the entire family, I know that's on tonight of Baragani Hotel, you free to land. And so hopefully we didn't miss anybody. And just what's up to all the brothers and sisters in Compton and LA County. What's up?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, Professor Muhammad, Professor Rahh, first
Yeah.
off, thank you, brother, for always allowing us a platform. And for those who don't know, Professor Rahh has been a long distance runner. As I heard Dr. Khalid introduce you one time, talked about long distance runner, that you have always been and been consistent in your work with the, and you know, I first, as one of your former students at Long Beach State, I never officially enrolled in your class, but you always welcome the outsiders. You to come on the campus and push the final call with no problem and made sure that we always had a space and place at the Black Consciousness Conference, brother. And then for those who don't know it, a lot of times when we needed that support at Compton College with the facilities there, brother, you have always made a space and a place for us to do revolutionary and spiritual work on behalf.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to tell you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You must, you can. Thank you too, Brother Reginald, for all your work and your consistency, along with your sister, and but mainly you, what you're doing in Atlanta and what you're doing nationwide. I saw where you was sitting down talking on a round table with some brothers just recently.
Yes, sir.
I forget what you call them, but you said something you had a name for the brainstorming, and that was beautiful, brother. So, all right, education.
Of course, Dr. Walter Rodney called it the groundings with my brothers and sisters.
Yeah, right. Again, Walter Rodney. Yeah, good art, political science.
Yeah, but I want to thank too, Brother Brian, for being on here. He's real humble, Professor Rodney. But
Hey,
traveled the world.
You can tell he's a Nation of Islam.
Okay.
You can tell it. He just speaks the language, the sound, and the mannerism. You understand? That's beautiful.
Along with Minister Akbar and the minister, I don't know anybody else who's traveled more African countries, brother, and then parts of the world in different continents.
Yeah. Brother Jamil used to with the minister.
Yep.
I know may Allah bless him. And
Yes.
there was a lot of, the minister was a traveling guy. And he took his soldiers with him, Big Captain Shahid.
Oh, yeah.
Big Cap, me and Big Cap went to elementary school together.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
In
Okay.
Watts.
I remember words at his homegoing.
Yeah.
Charlene quoted you a number of times in the final call during Captain Shahid's homegoing a couple years back now. And so, brother, we grateful and appreciative. But Brother Brian, let's open up with Brother Brian, because I think that he's written a very valuable article. It is timely, it's applicable, it's political, and he's again, and I'm just thankful, Professor Rod, to be a student of all of you all. That's all I'm gonna claim. I'm working hard to become a better student. And
you're not a revolutionary if you're not a student.
Yes, sir.
Right.
But let's please go with Brother Brian first and allow the audience to see some who are not familiar with him. And the key is to Professor Rod, because of the support of the people. The Final Call newspaper is the widest circulated Black newspaper in the world.
It was number one in the 70s, the number one national Black newspaper.
Yes, sir. And I didn't say the most printed, but I said the widest circulated Black newspaper in the world, because you're on 4 continents. You got the digital version, and you got thousands of foot soldiers that go out every week with that final call. And Brother Brian articles are certainly timely, and they're a lot of times they're featured articles, and we're just thankful that he's on tonight. And I'm gonna shut up and allow brother to do his thing and talk about what he's doing now around this question of resurgence of Pan-Africanism.
Yes, sir. So first, I want to thank all of you, for even having me on to talk about this subject, because there is a resurgence of Pan-Africanism, particularly on the continent. This article that's in front of us on the screen, this article actually speaks about the undergirding movement that is really pushing this thrust into Pan-Africanism. It started with the youth, and I had interviewed a couple of people on this article, and one person told me that the way she saw it, there was a movement based on the dissatisfaction of the youth. The continent has 60% of the continent are under the age of 25 years old. 60%. That's tremendous, And so, and a lot of people don't realize that African youth are some of the most educated youth in the world. So now you got a situation where you have those that have attained higher education, but no job opportunities really on the continent for their level of skill. And of course, that there is a lot of brain drain that goes on, that has gone on over the years, where, those who became highly educated went abroad to do their professions, and which is another thing that we need to understand and talk about. But there seems to be this movement of youth where they are not reconciling the fact that they have gained education, but their people are in abject poverty. And they're not lost to the fact that you have, outside interests who controls and own and runs, their diamond mines, who runs their bauxite mines, who is exploiting the continent and getting rich. And then of course you have neo-colonial forces in that mix of their own people as well, who is waxing rich from the resources. Meanwhile, you got 60% of Africans under 25, and most of them are unemployed and doesn't see any way out. So there was this undergirding dissatisfaction. My teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, has always talked about the fact that whenever there's dissatisfaction becomes the mother of change, and a Black woman will produce a child that will be the catalyst for that change. And so this is what we're seeing in Africa right now. We're seeing young people who are pushing for change. And this is the undergirding or the underpinning move, for Pan-Africanism on the rise. We saw what went on in Mali. We saw what went on in Burkina Faso. We saw what went on in Niger. These coups that took place, if you want to call them that, they didn't just come up in a vacuum. They didn't come up in a vacuum. They came up under a situation, again, where there was dissatisfaction among the people. Meanwhile, you had the United States, you had France, you had this fight, or this so-called warring against these insurgents, that was moving their way through the Sahel region of Africa. And for those, I know you all know, but for those who may be watching who are not familiar with how Africa is situated, if you just take a map of Africa and go right to the middle, right straight through the middle of it from east to west, that is the Sahel region. All right, that's a huge region from coast to coast that encompasses, several African countries from coast to coast. And so there was this problem of these insurgents who were linked to groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and the United States and France used the presence of these groups as a pretext to keep their respective militaries on the ground in Africa. Now, there's this new scramble for African resources going on that involves a number of nations, right? United States have not been faring too well with that. In fact, they've been at the bottom of the barrel of that. Of that competition, this multi-country competition for the resources of Africa. And based on the history of America, whenever America is on the losing end, they get gangster on us. They just get straight up gangster. So now you got AFRICOM in there, and this is to assure that the United States had a level of presence for the resources that many of these countries were fighting for. All right. So now the contradiction that we have to look at with this, particularly with France and the United States, in the name of fighting these insurgents, was keeping their tentacles in these countries that these insurgents were wreaking havoc in, namely Mali, right? Certainly Niger, Burkina Faso. See? And so by the US and France saying that we're going to, fight these terrorism, now we're going to stay in your land, really keep our tentacles in your land under the pretext of fighting terrorism. This so-called war on terrorism is so-called because these same people who were again, they're wreaking havoc across the continent, these insurgent groups. But the contradiction and the hypocrisy of America and France is that America and France was part of the move by NATO that overthrew the government of Muammar Gaddafi and subsequently facilitated the way or facilitated his killing. And when they did that, this opened the door for arms that was all throughout Libya. It opened the door for these caches of arms that was there. And these groups, these same terrorists that America and them saying are terrorists, they were also still in Libya. But when Brother Gaddafi was in power, he contained that activity because they were no friends of his because he was socialist. And they did not, they were about, at least this is what people claim, that they were about establishing an Islamic government, if you will, And again, that's questionable. But the point is, they were no friends of Brother Gaddafi, but he contained them. And these are the same people that the United States led, NATO and France and all these people, to use in the destabilization of Libya in 2011. So that 8 months of war, that 8 months of, of what they're saying were the uprising of the Libyan people, it was actually supported and fostered by the United States in particular. So when they were successful in eliminating Brother Gaddafi, it opened the door for this move across the continent of these insurgent groups. And that's the hypocrisy. So now you cause a problem, then you kind of come in and say to the African nations who now have become the victim, so to speak, of these insurgent groups, you caused them to, you unleashed them is what you did. As I was saying in the words of Brother Farrakhan, when Minister Farrakhan, was responding to a question about the death of Brother Gaddafi and the overthrow of Libya, he said these words. He said, "You have now let the dogs of destruction out." People maybe didn't understand what he was talking about. But if you think back to Brother Gaddafi and all that he, as he was fighting this campaign against him in his country, then the Western media showed him on TV. Some of y'all may remember this. And he wasn't speaking full English, but he was saying, "It's Al-Qaeda, it's Al-Qaeda." Maybe, I hope some of y'all may remember that. People thought he was crazy. So you talking about Al-Qaeda? This ain't Al-Qaeda. These are your people rising up against you. Well, what he was saying was the insurgents that he kept at bay in his own country, these are the people that the United States used and paid to be part of the undermining of Libya. And when they were successful again in eliminating Brother Gaddafi, then these groups got a hold of those weapons caches and they began to move across the Sahel region, wreaking havoc. And these are the people that were being fought against in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Niger, and in other countries. I said all of that to say this. You start the problem, you start the fire, then now you're talking about putting out the fire. We should trust you. That's what the young people could not reconcile on the African continent. So two things. The lack of opportunities for them was one level of dissatisfaction. The next level of dissatisfaction was that you have these foreign militaries, namely France and America here, talking about fighting against these insurgents, and they were not being successful. And the young people could not reconcile that. So they began to call for France to get the hell up out of Africa. They began to call for this removing of America and French military. And then, when these coups took place, this was one of the main things that was on their agenda to fight, was to push these foreign militaries out, and they will now handle the fight against these insurgents, even if they had to call on Russia and come up with some new and different foreign entities who they felt would respect their sovereignty more. Because remember, France was in there doing what it was doing to quote unquote help in fighting these insurgencies, but France was also still playing the slave master relationship with the African countries. Same thing with the United States. So again, the young people could not reconcile this. They were not trying to feel that. And they began to push. See, so now you see these young African leaders, or these new African leaders who came together or came into power by military coup. And I know some people may have a problem with that. I say be patient. Because sometimes you have to take control of a thing and reorganize your thing, you know, and then let's talk about quote unquote democracy. But what these particularly, especially Ibrahim Traore is saying, okay, if we're going to talk about that, let's not talk about Western style democracy. You act as though Africans did not have some level of governance before you all came together at the Berlin Conference, right? You all act like we were not a people. See, what, you know, when I lived in Ghana, for example, I would watch the lawyers and the barristers and the different level of, you know, of legal minds going in and out of the courts there. I didn't really understand it. But why would you use the Westminster system of jurisprudence? Wigs, gowns, and all. Are you telling me that the beautiful seamstresses that are in Africa you could not design a legal outfit from our culture? See, so these are the things that I'm saying to you that young people are beginning not to reconcile with, because they have now seen their grandfathers and great-grandfathers at this point who were the progenitors of their independence, and how we are still in the same condition as we were when we gained independence. But the interference never left. So we went from colonialism to neocolonialism to this thing that they have that's still neocolonialism, but it's, you know. So now we're seeing again this resurgence of young people who are looking at all of this history, because again, these are not dummies. They can't reconcile. And I'm gonna say this last point, then maybe we can open it up and talk to each other. During the year of COVID, when people were on lockdown and public events was shut down, the use of social media, people began to do more on social media. You know, there's a sister from the All African People Revolutionary Party who mentioned to me that, you know, nobody was doing live meetings, so everybody's trying to find a way to communicate online, and they began to push videos of Brother Kwame Traore, and you know, and that was their way as that, you know, as their organization to do something. Being that nobody was meeting live, they this was their like contribution. Let's at least post these videos, and you know, and it began to spread throughout Africa. But then what they began to see was that people began to start their own podcasts. You know, they began to do a lot of these Zoom meetings and whatnot. And they began to see that it was becoming more and more Pan-Africanist in scope, in view, in conversation. See? So again, there was an underpinning movement that was budding, and circumstances kind of pushed it to another level. And this is where we're at now. This is where we're at now. So perhaps the Traores, the other brother in Mali and in Niger, yes, they came as a result of coups, but perhaps they would not be as strong as they are, if it was not for the knowledge that they are truly backed by their people. Otherwise, some of them probably would have came to power who are not talking Pan-Africanism, but knowing the expediency of having to make deals, maybe would have still fell in the hands of the enemy. But I'm saying the level of strength of the people are so strong in Africa now, especially among the youth, that they are even emboldened to not just talk Pan-Africanism, but now they're putting the structure in place for us to move forward and keep moving forward, but from a Pan-African view, not this truth mixed with falsehood thing that we've had to experience over the years. So I'm gonna end it there. And yeah.
Appreciate what you said. Brother Reginald, you want to make a comment?
Yes, I just want to add to what Brother Brian has said and things that you and others have taught over the years. Professor Rahh, and to the audience, remember too, there is a foundation that this has evolved from. Think about it in this context. When you see Captain Ibrahim Traore and others, he's a student of Thomas Sankara. Remember Julius Malema. These are all students of the Pan-African movement now who have been nursed on it, who have been educated. And then too, Professor Rahh, this is a youth that Minister Farrakhan has talked about. He said that they're the best generation that we have produced. He didn't say that they were always the wisest, but he said that they're the best generation we produce. Why? Because they are not afraid. They are much more energetic to do the work and to get up and do for self. You cannot relegate them to one part of the earth. You cannot relegate them to one area of discipline. They're all over, Professor Rahh. And again, these are, when you start talking about, we're seeing what's happening in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Nigeria. But think about the rest of that whole Pan-African movement. So we know the history of it, of the great work of Nkrumah and their independence in the late 50s. Then we know the 60s and on into the 70s. And so we have 54 African countries who are developing, where their youth are much more educated, they're much more enlightened. They are using have utilized the technology, Professor Rahh, that Brother Brian has talked about, especially during COVID. But these are Julius Malema out of Zambia, that they now call South Africa. Brother, these are Winnie Mandela's and other the revolutionaries. These are their students. These are the people that they developed, and now they have come to power. And then too, what's key about it also with this youth, Professor Rahh, and to others, even the youth here in the United States, they have some of them have been able to, through the enlightenment and through education and through culture, they have shaken off the old remnants of what I call caucaphobia, the collective fear, intimidation of European people, or those who classify themselves as Caucasian, white, Aryan, or Jewish. They have shaken off the old shackles of what is known as, we also title, post-plantation pathology, or a post-imperialist pathology. They have grown beyond that. And remember, the more knowledge you have about a thing, the less fear you have it. So many of them have learned, Professor Rahh, through the works of some of the great revolutionaries. They know the works now of Nkrumah. They know the work of Padmore. They know major, especially major works on Pan-Africanism. Giving you one example that one of the books that's used in hundreds of universities is called the Africa in World Politics, a Pan-African perspective. That's used in universities all over the country. And then an earlier work that Dr. Walter, what was his name? Ron Walters wrote, Pan-Africanism in the Diaspora. These are major works that our students are using all over the country. Think about it, Professor Rahh, all the people, all the thousands of students from throughout the diaspora and who came from the continent, who used to come to the Black Consciousness Conference, but with a Pan-African base and foundation. So now you are seeing, so as he said, it didn't just happen out of a vacuum. There's some foundation, there's some history there, Professor Rahh, and now we're starting to see that manifestation of that history.
Good. Appreciate what both of y'all said, if I understand correctly. A lot of people do not know what Pan-Africanism is, or even the definition of it. Because y'all are so conscious and you're very inclusive, you forget that most of our people, the closest in California that they get that Pan-Africanism is Leimert Park. Then once they get, they don't watch the news, even though there's a African news app you can get, as well as that there are certain programs that talk about the continent of Africa on cable TV, but they very seldom watch it. But the Pan-African movement is a long one. It started a long time ago, but many of us did not get it because for various reasons. So could Brian or both of y'all define Pan-Africanism? We know it means Pan means all.
Yes, sir.
All African people. But go ahead, brother.
Well, let me give not a formal definition of Pan-Africanism, and Brother Brian, allow him to give his definition. But you're talking about the unification of African, the political, economic, and cultural unification of Black people throughout the diaspora, who are originally from Africa.
And diaspora means dispersed, who
yes,
from the continent of Africa that was
exactly.
dispersed.
And it has to be a unification. And the base of that Pan-Africanism is unification. And we look at it again from a political standpoint, from an education, and from a culture standpoint. That has to happen. If Africa is going to rise, if it's going to be free, if you're talking about finally the restoration and the transformation and the elevation of Black life, economically, politically, culturally, and socially, the thought is that it has to come from a Pan-African base. And of course, again, we'll get into that later, and how we push that Pan-African base and make sure it's assured it's complete reparations. But yeah, that's my I'm not looking, but that's my definition of and most people who define it, they'll talk about the unification of African people, Black African people throughout the world.
Yeah. Brian, you want to add?
Well, I mean, no, not really. I think he covered it. And I think it speaks also to the oneness of our spirit as a people. Across across the diaspora or the world. And recognizing that we are each other. And and all that we do to be empowered, that basis is respected. So it should have the potential for us not to fall into this thing that I personally believe is even more prevalent than racism in the world, called xenophobia. You know what I mean? I believe that. I believe it's more prevalent because if you know, if it's 30 million Black people in America and you add on those of us from the Caribbean and those of us from other, but you know, we see each other differently, you know, just from this, because this one has a particular accent. You know what I'm saying? Then it gets real crazy, you know, because the Haitians like a certain kind of stewed chicken, Jamaicans like jerk chicken, and me being here in the South, I may argue it down and talk about fried chicken, right? What are we talking about? But the bottom line of it is that we have these differences that we highlight, yet we're the same people. Although culturally and linguistically, there may be some nuances and differences, but we're the same people. So Pan-Africanism speaks to that oneness beyond borders and waters and, you know, and the various things that may apparently keep us separated, you know? And so, yeah, I would define it like that. It gives us that ability, you know, to see each other as one, regardless, you know.
Yeah. See, what would be the benefit of it to people who don't understand why there should be a Pan-African movement? I mean, I understand the call for unity, but unity entails a lot of things. Unity for what? What are we going to do? What is the goal? Brother Reginald talked about controlling our resources, you, Brother Brian, on the continent, and developing a global Pan-African movement, whereas we work together and share resources and develop power. I mean that gives us political, economical, educational, and social power. Set up our own value system, our own culture apparatus, and economic. But you know, see, we know that in this country, there's a few things that you got to deal with. One is taxes. You know, you got to pay taxes. You don't pay them, they take them. They got
That's right. That's right.
They tried to collect them, and that was the most dangerous job in the country for a long time.
That's right.
To collect taxes. Second, a military. You understand? I mean, you come together. You have to have a mechanism to protect the people. The military ain't not just like America. They go out and take countries, but all you want is a military just to be able to defend yourself.
That's right.
No matter where you are, and that's resources, and that's why they don't let Black countries get nuclear bombs. You know what I'm saying? So, and then a financial system. You mentioned it, Brother Reginald, about coming up with that. I think it was Reginald, about their own economic system, a medium of exchange for resources. What makes America powerful, they impose their dollar on everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
Not only is the dollar spent from the north to the south, and the east to the west, on this continent, even up in Cuba. But in Africa, you have to exchange, Brother Brian, you have to exchange money every time you go to another, almost across the street.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
And so,
but I think
Brother Jabal lived in Africa for years, and he told me about those experiences. But go ahead.
Well, I think that, again, when we see the oneness of us as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad put it in these words, which cut down the various descriptions that we have. So, he referred to us as the original family, that language, And so now in that original family, you have many different people, as you said. I mean, you got Nigerians, you got Ghanaians, you got Blacks here in America, you got, I mean, you name it. But I think that when we take a principled position and we can do business in Africa, for example, in anywhere in Africa, you know, the same way that the enemy does business, he goes in and he does business. What we're saying is, I think what we can say, you know, not to be dogmatic about it, but what we can say is that we can be that outlet, you know, for your resources or for whatever you have to offer at home on the continent. You see, we can be that outlet in the United States, in, you know, where other places that our people are at in the Caribbean. You see what I'm saying? So it doesn't become a thing where I'm coming there as an American. You know what that means? You know, that's a problem. It has been a problem. Our brothers in the United Kingdom, so-called this United Kingdom, I think at this point, but you go to, you know, they're going there as who you representing? You representing the crown? You know, or are you my brother coming home? You know, for business or otherwise. But first, I think we have to recognize each other as each other. And I always like to use the example of what happened with Liberia. You know, when the group of us who were enslaved went back or was facilitated to go back to the motherland. And when they got to Liberia, it became a problem because brothers didn't recognize brothers. The Liberians didn't recognize those that came, and those that came didn't recognize them. And then we had a double whammy because those that came back, the only paradigm they had for governance or relationship was the eye of white supremacy. Because that's what they faced, that's what we faced on the plantation, slave master relationship. So when you go back and you see your brother, what lens are you looking at your brother from? And this was the whole root of the Civil War that went right into the 1990s in Liberia. Because we lost the knowledge of ourselves. And our brothers really there did not know what happened to us coming on this side, whether even if they knew where we were. See, this is real. You go to the not so much nowadays, because there's been a lot of kind of interaction and education, you know, learning of one another. You go to Cape Coast in Ghana and Elmina, where they have these slaves. I never call them castles. There will be and always will be slave dungeons for me. So if I say that, don't get, you know, for the rest of those out there who may, you know, who may be going through brochures talking, I want to go to Ghana, and they see the Elmina castles. No, those are slave dungeons. But anyway, there are people who grew up right in that neighborhood those dungeons are, and never knew what that history was, never knew what those buildings were there for. See? So I'm saying that to say that there's an awakening that has to continue to take place, because we have a lot of dirt, you know. Let me speak for me, because I know when I went to live in Ghana, and I went there from a conscious point of view, so I thought, and I did. But you learn things about yourself, how much of the enemy is really in you. So I kind of laugh when, Kendrick Lamar, not laugh at him, but we like to use his song, they not like us. They not like us. And you know what? That is so true. But you know what the real problem is? We're still too much like them. We're too much like them. And we carry that wherever we go. So go ahead, brother. Reginald.
All right.
Brother Rahh, real quick.
Professor Rahh.
Yeah.
That, Brother Reginald, that has to be repeated. Brother Brian, that has to be repeated. We're too much like them. Thank
All right.
you.
All right. Okay, Brother Reginald.
Real quick, Professor Rahh, and to the rest of the audience, one of the other reasons you're seeing the resurgence of Pan-Africanism among our youth, they're looking at some of them because of the consciousness and how they have grown up in some of their foundation, Professor Rahh, with all the thousands of books out there now, the conferences that we've had, the Black leaders that have come about, come and gone. That foundation, Professor Rahh, we have a youth now who are looking at the enemy, especially that white ruling class, differently than they looked at him 50 years ago. Professor Rahh, they're able to see that when you start talking about the international white ruling class at the international level, federal or state or local level, they realize, Professor Rahh, that there are some differences, and they realize who's responsible for that oppression. They're starting to connect the dots to say, you know what? Massive unemployment, massive incarceration, massive underdevelopment, a massive underfunding of our institutions. They're understanding now why it is and why it has been for so long. One of the things that the former U.S. federal court judge, Alcee Hastings, one of his quotes, he and former Congressman Alcee Hastings used to say, we were blessed to bring him to Wilberforce University in the 80s. And he said, always remember this, when you're looking at systems internationally, nationally, and locally. He said, when something remains unfixed for so long, someone has a vested interest in it being broken. When something remains unfixed for so long, someone has a vested interest in it being broken. Our youth now understand who has that vested interest in making sure that our system has always been broken. And so now that they are challenging it, Professor Rahh, because they got degrees in everything, in every discipline. They're traveling like they had never traveled before in the last 50, 60, 70 years. That's happening with the explosion of the internet. And then two, the other thing, Brother Brian, I was talking about this impact study that we're coming. Many of them, Professor Rahh, at least got remnants of what I would have to classify as the Million Man March movement era. Many of them come from that era, Professor Rahh. And so, and as a result of that, that has helped lay a foundation for the resurgence of Pan-Africanism. Because again, they got the information that they didn't have before, Professor Rahh, and they got more information. And again, what I said at the beginning, the more information you have about a thing, the less fear you have of it. So they don't fear the white man the way our people may have feared him 40 years ago, especially segments of the black bourgeoisie, segments of the black bourgeoisie. So that becomes key and critical. So they're willing to make moves. They're willing to stand up. They're willing to organize. They're willing to take matters in their own hand and trust their instinct and say, we can do this. And so that's what you're starting to see some of that form and some of that develop. You go back and listen to who they've been feeding off of for the last 10 years. Let's look at, again, Julius Malema. Let's look at P.L.O. Lumumba. Let's look at, again, others who have come along over the last 10, 15, 20 years that has helped give them that foundation.
Well, let me just say that, as Brother Brian said, the Pan-African movement is moving strongly on the continent.
Yes, sir.
But I'm not sure if it's moving that strong in the United States and in other diaspora places.
Yes,
and
sir.
we got to get the word out.
Yes, sir.
And so because I mean they're getting rid of um, DEI, that include monitoring African Studies Department. When we first started the Black Studies Department in Long Beach, we had a class called Pan-Africanism.
Yes, sir.
Pan-Africanism. But I'm just saying that it's a very difficult thing. Brother Jabal, you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm listening intently, and unfortunately, when you speak is clear, but the other brothers is a little bit muffled for me, so I tried to follow along as best I can. Let me just say what I've been thinking about these last. And
That's
how it should be applied, and
Pastor Rob, we can't hear him well.
Yeah, I can't hear him.
Can you hear him better?
I can't hear him at all. I can hear him muffled.
They can't hear you, Jabal. Let me try something else. Can you hear him now? Go ahead, Jabal. Can you hear him now? Can y'all hear him?
No.
No, he can't, brother.
No, I can't hear him either.
Try it. I'm trying to find the speaker. Go ahead. Wait, damn it. Oh, wow. I lost him, Jabal. You there?
We can hear you, Professor Rob.
You can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you real clear, brother.
Okay. I got to come back on. Brother Brother Rashaki, go ahead and call on other people that to talk.
Okay. Okay, let's go to Ernest McBride. You got to unmute, Ernest.
Yeah, this kind of brings back memories for me because like Brother Brian was saying, America does that. And just like present day, they'll put arms and stuff in Ukraine to help them fight. But then African countries that are fighting and want help, maybe military help, they want to get the troops down there so they can get a foothold in there. And I've seen that happen over my years. And then the only thing about this movement that I think now, because I can remember back in the 60s, when in the early 70s, they had East African Airways and the Congo Airlines. They had Kinshasa then when it was the Congo. They put it back to, naming the country the Congo. And they sent about 8 or 9 each of the groups pilots to be trained at McDonnell Douglas. And my brother-in-law worked over there in the 2 shed, and then these guys used to come out of the classroom on breaks, and they'd come down there to try to look at him and go back, and he could kind of see them down the hallway, and then they were hesitant about even saying anything. And then when he finally approached them, he went out there and talked to them. So how you guys doing? And they said, oh, and kind of made friends with them. So we found, make a long story short, we found out where they were staying and went out and entertained them, invited them over for dinner. And then once we got to know them, because they were here like 6 weeks, the group from Congo, where they spoke French. So they had a couple of guys that interpreted. But then and the other group was from Nairobi, Kenya, so they spoke English. So we, when they overlapped, we, got to know them real well. But they had told us when they first come in, went was, the immigration people sit them down, told them, say, hey, don't talk to Black people, Americans, because they're dangerous and they'll carry razors and they'll cut your throat and all this kind of stuff, made it negativism, about American Blacks. And then when we got to talking to them, we found out, we made real friends with them. And even some of those guys was from Uganda in Nairobi, and they guys sit me down and say, you know, Ernest, they were telling me all these things, why they're trying to indoctrinate them not to get involved with blacks. But he's saying my country said like we're socializing and having fun. Me and this one guy's name was Paul, and he was from Uganda, and Enoch, and then another Paul was from Nairobi. He said, you know, our parents would have a fit if they saw us trying to socialize. So they don't socialize with one another. So this is the first time we ever been under the same roof with a guy, you know, from a different country. So anyway, you know, and at the end of it, we learned a lot of things because they're told negative things about how dangerous we are. So the whites are trying to keep us apart, you know, to make a long story short. But they were here for about 12 weeks, so we learned a lot. And then I used to correspond with the guys, write them, and then all of a sudden the letters stopped. And then I heard the conflict, the Congo, you know, Zaire and Kinshasa went back to Congo and they're warring and stuff. So I think that's the problem with Americans. We look at African is they can't get along with one another. And, you know, and even the guys told me, so Ernie, you know, like Ernest said, we and Africans, we look at American blacks as being mongrels. You're not the true African because you mongrels. I said, well, you right about that because we got all kind of nationalities running through our blood because of slavery, you know, which was no fault of ours. So that was the thing I've seen over my life is we got to figure out, I hope these youth can get everybody together because that's going to be the number one problem, you know, because through history and even the parents of different tribes didn't like one another, couldn't get along. So well, I don't know. So to me, that's going to be a tough sale, you know. But I see what you're saying, though, you know.
But you know, if I could say this about that point, it's a tough sale, but you know, that's where the constant education, political education, you know, and being very honest about the violations that take place to keep us apart.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's interesting how, you know, when I keep going back to Ghana because, you know, living there and you know, you listen to the radio and so the music, our music that is sent there, you know, from the hip hop genre, you know, and here, you know, of course, unless you listen to satellite radio or, you know, but regular radio stations, they have a clean version and they have a version that's unfiltered, right?
Yeah. So
in Ghana, they play the unfiltered on the regular radio. And so the same way that these things have an effect on how music affects us, because we're a rhythmic people. Is that the right word, rhythmic?
Yes, sir.
All these scholars here, I gotta ask.
Yeah.
You know? But we're a rhythmic people. So, you know,
soul, like you say.
Exactly, we got soul, exactly. Yeah. But meanwhile, the soulless ones are the ones who have the power to market, you know, us around the world. They're the ones that have that you know, that can take us in the record studio and change up, even if we want to do something for the soul of our people. They say no. We're not going to put no marketing budget behind that. But say this, you know, say that thing that you people like, you know, like they talk like that, right? But this cultural imperialism, it shapes, it reinforces the wrong misperception of us and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a strong debate now going on the internet about, who, the foundational Black versus others. And this is this thing, but to me, and I could be wrong because I didn't really talk to any of those who are in that conversation too much. I could be wrong, but that whole idea is driven by, again, xenophobia. The fear, and I would even go as far as hatred of all things foreign, are different from you. So, but I'm saying that the spirit for change is in our young people, whether they're here or on the continent or in the Caribbean or out over in the UK or wherever you find the spirit is there. What gets jacked up is the orientation of the mind in things that we're told about each other. So I look at you suspect before I even get to know who you are. See? And the same thing with the brothers and sisters from the continent. There's cultural things that protects them from some of the things that we might do and we're used to doing. It may look like degeneracy to them in some ways, right? I'm just saying there's some things, but rather than try to figure out, well, why do you say that, or why do you a judgment call is made before trying to understand and be educated. So the brothers were here working and they interacted with you, but at the same time as they're interacting with you, Brother Ernest, they're looking over their mental shoulder. Man, if my parents saw me talking to you,
yeah.
But so this is, and the same thing when we go to Africa. Now, more and more people are traveling now, but back in the day, it's like, you going where? Africa. And they act as though, you living over there in Africa. How do you eat? Like, do you go out with the spear and go get you see an elephant out there, and how long does an elephant last, for your family? A month, 2 months, 3 months, I'm just saying. So this it's the orientation. Our minds have to be reorientated. And so even though the spirit of change is in our people, I'm talking about our young people in particular, the orientation of mind now has to be added to the mix, so that as they struggle against the injustices that we're faced every day, then they'll begin to see, damn, I live in a colony, right? You live in the projects in any city in America, you living in the damn colony.
Teach.
Then the police, they are what they are. They are keepers of the colony, keep you in control.
Teach.
See? So when we begin to understand and be reorientated, because again, the spirit is there. That's why we saw what we saw in the uprising, for example, after George Floyd. After he was killed, there was this energy in the streets, white, black, but and it's like that. But because the spirit of it is all there, but now the orientation of the mind has to now catch up with that spirit. Yes, sir, Brother Reginald. Pardon me.
No, brother, I'm just adding to your point. But what's helping, you're right, the spirit, and then the mindset has to change, and there has to be a re-education to a degree. Brother, one of the best things, not best things, but one of the things that was key with our youth, even in America, because Professor Rahh said about our youth here, as opposed to the youth on the continent who now are developing a Pan-African agenda. And we know it's in a very embryonic stage, in a very early stage. But what has helped push that to the degree that we can even talk about reparations, we can talk about Pan-Africanism, we can talk about other systems besides capitalism, brother, is that how the white man, and I'm painting with a broad brush now, has treated our people. Our youth had to see that to a degree, Professor Rahh. You could not have told my children and your children about the 60s, and they have an appreciation for it and can connect with it. And the enslavement and trafficking of Black people. Notice I didn't say the transatlantic slave trade. I said the transatlantic enslavement and trafficking of Black people, Jim Crow and segregation. Our children, Professor Rahh, was almost duped to a degree, and I'm talking about the masses of them, about this post-racial society. So they had to see a Trayvon Martin. They had to see a George Floyd. They had to see a Breonna Taylor in order to understand what we have been teaching and what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan had been teaching about European culture and behavior.
Yeah, appreciating what you said, if I understand correctly.
And so
Prodigy Wilson did say they're miseducated, but they're not just miseducated in public and white-dominated school system.
Yes, sir.
They're miseducated at home.
Oh, exactly.
And a lot of the responsibility of educating your children to consciousness, political awareness, and activity, and teaching it to be of value, that's a home responsibility.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you go to school to learn trade and learn how to manipulate through the system, but you know who the hell you are. But when you go to school and they turn you around, you come back trying to teach your parents how to speak proper. Like, that's education, rather than and listen to how your parents think. But a lot of that was out of fear, oppression, oppression, and that was a part of the defense from getting lynched. They didn't want to teach the kids to go out there and they say something like Emmett Till, just hello, and get killed. You understand? So they taught you, keep your head down, don't say number yowsome and nosum, and don't talk about slavery and the brutality of it, because they didn't want to inflame our youth.
Absolutely.
Understand? And so I understand that. But now, today, you understand, where you do have the ability to teach your children and how to act and how to use that information is what we have to begin to push among ourselves and among people. I know some parents are doing it.
Yes,
you
sir.
understand? We wouldn't have people like y'all, some institutions. I mean, y'all came up in the nation as youngsters, you understand? And so you way ahead of the kids. But on the continent, many of us here are more Black or conscious than the brothers on the continent.
That's true.
Brother Brian. They
Yes,
got more
sir.
Christian churches in the continent than they have in the United States.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking at all them running out there talking about my Pope. You understand what I mean? We got a new Pope. What? Man, do you know the history of the Catholic Church?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know the history of their role in enslavement? You know their role in lynching, their role in imperialism and against the Native American, and where you think Mexicans come from? Spain? You understand? No. I mean, that's the thing. We have to have more education in a home, like not like masonry, but what we call mystery system. And that's what we used to teach at Long Beach State. See, the thing we played Farrakhan. We played the excerpts from Francis Cresswell scene. We played Khalid Muhammad. We played, all those things, Dr. Ben.
Yes, right.
John Henry Clark and all that. They weren't getting that nowhere else.
That's right. That's right.
That's why they came to the class.
That's right.
We let strangers in.
That's
I
right.
don't care who come in, you need this.
That's right. That's right.
You understand? And so my point is that the struggle continues. But we even got today, modern day people that still won't teach their kids that they're African or Asiatic, however the nation want to call it. But at least you ain't from here. You understand? And and consciousness, man. But we gonna have to continue this. Maybe segment 2 in a couple of weeks, and bring Brother Brian back and you back, because we didn't even get to repatriation or a reparation. We got to get to them, and y'all, y'all are welcome guests. We got 2 guests for my next 2 Tuesdays.
Okay.
Dr. Rosemary Allen. She's a professor at Metro State in Colorado, but she's also had one of the biggest nonprofits in Colorado that deals with Black children in the educational system, getting suspended, put in special ed at a higher rate than Caucasians who come there and can't even spell their name.
That's right.
Because many of them don't go to Head Start. You understand? And our kids are ahead of them, and they putting the kids just ahead. I know they put me in special training. I graduated with honors.
That's right.
On time with my class.
That's right.
So that's a whole new different thing. I was just putting special training twice. At Holmes Avenue in the Pebbles, and at Ritter, me and Big Shaheed.
Yes, sir.
And Cap was no special training. He was just straight out of Chicago at that time. But anyway, I'm just saying that next week we got Rosemary Allen. Then the week after that we got Jabal, and y'all are welcome to come in 2 weeks back. And we got to deal with repatriation, especially Brother Brian, who has lived all over the continent, and Brother Jabal that has lived all over the continent, and get the 2 perspectives. And you, Reginald, to talk about the reparation movement. I mean, you got a conference, you had a conference or something that's coming up, or you just had.
We just got off the road. We were in Norfolk, Virginia. We did 3 days in 4 different locations with our people, and it was educational for me, and hopefully that they allowed us to come in and teach. And we had a diversity of people, Professor Rahh, and again, our job is again to make sure that at the end of the day, that we secure complete reparations for the masses of our people, and our people don't end up with crumbs and confetti, calling it reparations.
See, unity is very hard to get.
Yeah.
Especially with people that don't want to be unified.
Yes, sir.
We're building the Black National United Front, which I was the chair of the LA chapter.
Yes, sir.
The chair by all the Black organizations.
Yes, sir.
Back in the 80s, maybe, the early 80s. And the first thing they say, I ain't coming if that end is going to be there. So how you going to have unity? we come to a unity meeting.
Yeah.
And then, can my white woman come? And white oppression people, can they be a member of it? It took us a year and a half to write the Constitution. Or you'd be surprised at the groups that say they Black, but they're more integrated than the civil rights movement. You go to their meeting, white women sitting up there with their mixed babies. You understand? I mean, it's rough. But anyway, so in a couple of weeks, I'm gonna call you again, Reginald. And
yes,
Brian,
sir.
Please come back, and then we're gonna get Jabal on after Dr. Allen. And Jabal has the wealth of knowledge, I'm telling you. In Japan for years.
Brother. Yes, sir.
He lived in Africa, he lived in Cuba, and he lived here. And he's still in Cuba over 30
This is the ultimate
years.
foreign experience.
Yeah, so we're going to have him. And he got some new perspectives on repatriation. Saying that's one of the solutions to our problem. Our brother Rashaki, you want to close us out?
All right, man. This has been brilliant. And the reorientation of the mind is at the base of this conversation tonight, for me at least. I just appreciate you brothers for being here and can't wait to hear you again. So tomorrow we have my niece coming on, the 8th grader, She's a straight A student.
Mm.
We're gonna interview her. So I'm looking forward to that. And we're gonna keep doing this and hopefully when I'm gone, somebody else take it over. So
Yes, sir.
I just appreciate everybody coming out tonight. And we will be back tomorrow and next week doing the same type of things. So each one teach one in Conscious Corner. Everybody continue to have a great day.
Brother Brian, get my number from Reginald Muhammad. Always keep it. If you have anything important you want to Zoomcast, give me a call and we'll try to get you on. Reggie already got, Brother Reginald Muhammad already got that. When he asked me, can I do that? I said, man, you got my carte blanche, man. You know, you on all the time if we can fit it in. All right,
Yes,
and that's the same offer go to you, brother. It's a pleasure meeting you, brother.
You as well, all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, all right, and the brother Ernest too. Lynda, I'm glad you stayed on. All right.
All right.
Thank you all, Professor Rahh. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.
All right then, my brother.
All right.
Excellent presentation. This will be on YouTube too, Brian.
Oh, will it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll send it to him.
Okay, thank you,
We're
brother.
going to send you a copy
Thank
of
you.
it so that you can
Okay,
send it
great.
to other people if you choose.
All right.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
We'll
Right,
take
take
our
care.
pause. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, brother.
You as well.
Assalamu alaikum.
Like salam.
Alaikum salam.